how do you see the AEC consulting industry shifting away from kind of the legacy model firms used to run on, kind of like what you mentioned earlier with when the founders started here, towards how leaders are operating today?
When I started, and I just looked this up a little while ago because I was interested, but at the time, they're getting over 30 years ago, the largest engineering consulting firm at that time, I believe, had about 7,000 staff. So our engineering consulting industry has really matured and developed and continues, obviously, to mature and develop since that time. And now, there's much larger firms are operating. And what I see as I look into the future for our industry is really a continuation of those trends. I see firms continuing to expand their global reach. I see firms in our sector becoming much more sophisticated around technology. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion around AI.
For decades, AEC consulting firms grew by following a familiar playbook: build the client base, take on more work, and scale steadily over time. But today's mega projects don't play by those same old rules, and the firms still clinging to that legacy model are quietly falling behind the ones willing to rebuild from the ground up. Joining us today is Derek Amidon, licensed professional engineer, chief operating officer at GISI, and chief executive officer at GISI Consulting Group. GISI is a company that works on iconic projects. Derek has held senior leadership roles at Tetra Tech, WSP, Hess, and Haley & Aldrich, and now leads strategic planning, M&A activity, and long-term growth initiatives across GISI's operating companies. In this episode, we're going to get into how the legacy model of AEC consulting compares to how leading firms operate today, what's driving the added complexity in today's mega projects, and where Derek sees the biggest opportunities for growth ahead. Now, before I jump in with Derek, I do want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, a series of in-person events that we've created at EMI for AEC project managers and the leaders who develop them. If you want to stay on top of PM trends, elevate your team, and deliver stronger project results, these full-day events are built for you. We're coming to Kansas City this October. Learn more and register at aecpmconnect.com. I'm your host, Anthony Pisano, and this is the Civil Engineering CEO. All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Joining us today is Derek Amidon. Derek is a licensed professional engineer, chief operating officer at GISI, and chief executive officer at GISI Consulting Group. Derek, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Well, thanks, Anthony. I'm very glad to be here on your show.
No, we're happy to have you. And I think a good place to start will be, tell us about GISI, and then I want to hear your role there, but tell us how it's structured, kind of your role in the company, just to get us going here, Derek.
Yeah, the GISI story is a fascinating story. I joined here about 3 years ago, in part because of the amazing story here. So if you roll back 10 years ago, some of the most well-known and most successful entrepreneurs in the engineering consulting industry got together. Dick Newman, Rick Newman, John Denisio, and Jeff Kissel. And these are guys who had decades, near 40, 50 years of experience in this industry. And they got together, as I said, 10 years ago. And they realized that they'd learned many critical, important lessons over their careers. And as they looked at the industry, they thought, there's a better way to do a business in engineering consulting. They thought that these lessons that they had learned could be put to good use if they formed a new business, which is exactly what they did. And so from those kind of humble beginnings 10 years ago, we now have a business that is on track to exceed more than $21 billion in revenue.
Wow.
We're going to have pretty close to 17,000 staff. So it's been quite a growth trajectory over the past decade. And I'll just tell you a little bit about my role and a little bit about how we're structured. So the way we're structured is we have our parent company is GISI Inc. And GISI Inc. Has two platforms underneath it. One is our construction platform, which we call STOBG, and the other is our consulting, project management, and engineering firm called GISI Consulting Group. And so my role is I'm the chief operating officer for the entire enterprise, and I also am the CEO for the consulting group.
Okay, that's a great introduction for us, just for us to try to, understand the background and being someone who's a civil engineer and entrepreneur myself, when you were rattling off the names of the founders, those are like Hall of Famers. I
They
mean,
are Hall of
I've heard of
Famers,
all these
absolutely.
guys and they've done amazing things in the industry. So I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm kind of surprised just because 21 billion is a massive number, but I'm not surprised when you understand, the people involved and kind of what they've been able to do here, which I think is great. And before I kind of dive in a little bit, because we do want to talk, of course, about the business, I'm going to ask you some questions about the industry. I want to hear a little bit about your journey because a lot of our listeners are civil engineers, Derek. And when you start your career as a civil engineer, you don't know that you're necessarily going to be CEO or COO or kind of where you're headed in your career. So I was wondering if you could just take a few minutes to tell our listeners a little bit about that journey from kind of civil engineer into leadership, into executive leadership. What was it like for you? How did it unfold? Was it something that was kind of a goal of yours from early on? Maybe you could just share a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I decided to become a civil engineer about 35 years ago, in part because my father gave me some advice about the industry, and that it was an industry that was made up of that time quite a few smaller firms. And I remember my father kind of advising me, saying, this is an industry where you can be both an engineer and an entrepreneur. And that's exactly the path that I've been on the last 35 years. And so I started as many civil engineers do, very technically focused early in my career, but fairly rapidly started to evolve. Although the technical aspect and project delivery has always been really from day one till now part of what I do, part of what I'm focused on. But this focus on growing businesses, mentoring, developing staff, and creating value for shareholders is something that I've found very exciting as a civil engineer. And there aren't that many industries where you can essentially do it all. And that's one thing that's a little bit unique about civil engineering.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, again, I think a lot of civil engineers, they start their careers, they just start designing, right? Like you said, doing the technical work. And then one day maybe you become a project manager, right? And then, I kind of like this. Then maybe you become a department manager and so on and so forth. And it can kind of unfold. So I think the big message to civil engineers out there listening is just to keep working on those non-technical skills, right? In addition to your technical background, the communication skills, the leadership skills, because to Derek's point, there's just a lot of opportunities in our industry for leaders, right? And as civil engineers, there's huge infrastructure projects. There's all kinds of opportunities for you to grow those leadership skills. And I think Derek is a good example as we dive into this conversation with him. So, Derek, let's talk a little bit about the industry. How do you see the AEC consulting industry shifting away from kind of the legacy model firms used to run on, kind of like what you mentioned earlier with when the founders started here, towards how leaders are operating today?
Yeah, when I started, and I looked this up a little while ago because I was interested, but at the time, they're getting over 30 years ago, the largest engineering consulting firm at that time, I believe, had about 7,000 staff. So our engineering consulting industry has really matured and developed, and continues obviously to mature and develop since that time. And now, there's much larger firms. Firms are operating globally in a way that they didn't at the beginning of my career. And what I see as I look into the future for our industry is really a continuation of those trends. I see firms continuing to expand their global reach. I see firms becoming in our sector becoming much more sophisticated around technology. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion around AI, and I'm sure we'll get into that later in our discussion
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
So it is the single hottest topic to talk about. But as I look into the future, I see an industry that's going to continue to present great opportunities for new civil engineers coming into the industry. And as you had mentioned, there's different paths. Right? That's the one thing I love about this industry is there's paths that are technical for staff. There's paths that are from a leadership, from a business development perspective. Our industry, our business is so complicated and sophisticated in many ways that there's many different roles and there's many paths as people work through their careers. And I see that kind of continuing as we move into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the AEC industry, skilled project managers are the backbone of success. EMI's AEC PM certification offers tailored training, ongoing support, and exclusive access to premium content that keeps your team sharp and effective. From foundational training to advanced leadership tools, set your team apart with certified growth. Learn more at aecpm.com. That's aecpm.com. Before we do get into AI, because I do want to go there, what would you say is driving we see this added complexity in today's mega projects, right? They seem to be so much more complex than when I started in civil engineering, 25 years ago. What is driving, what's creating that added complexity, and how is that going to impact, you know, the future of these projects, meaning like the infrastructure funding that's going to come down the pipeline? Like, it seems like projects keep getting more complicated and our infrastructure is crumbling at the same time.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think, projects and client organizations, just like as I mentioned in our consulting engineering industry, become larger and more complex. Our clients have also trended to larger and more complex.
Hmm.
And the projects that they tackle have followed suit. Right. So if you look at kind of average project size, there again, go back at the beginning of my career compared to now,
Right.
there's so many more mega projects, projects that dwarf, there's always been large projects, of course, but
Sure.
I think there's more large projects now. And there's technical complexities that have emerged for certain projects because they were never tackled before. They're being tackled now. There's complexity politically. There's complexity
Sure.
from a regulatory perspective.
Right.
So the complexity is just kind of naturally kept pace, I think, with just as the world has become more technologically advanced, as legal risks have morphed and changed over time. Again, at the beginning of my career, I think back to the contracts that we would negotiate on projects. They were vastly different than the types of
Right.
risks that we take on contracts today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really good point. I'm sure if there's data out there that if you were to look at an engineering company, 20, 30 years ago, in terms of the number of projects that they worked on that maybe had a construction cost of over $100 million or whatever, pick a number, versus today, I would imagine, of course, that number today is larger, which introduces a lot of the complexities that you mentioned. And, at EMI, we do a lot of project management, development training and programs, and also people leadership programs. And I always tell people, when I started the company 13, 14 years ago, our phones weren't necessarily ringing off the hook, and now they are. And I think the reason is because of the complexity of the projects also requires your project managers to have many more skill sets that maybe 20 years ago weren't as important as they are today, right? In terms of communication, presenting, handling difficult conversations, negotiating with people, being on the lookout for scope creep, right? Because scope creep on a $1 million project versus scope creep on a $100 million project is a much bigger animal. And so I think that the mega projects will require larger organizations, right? Like your organization and other organizations that are out there that have all the skill sets and technical expertise to handle these projects. But they're also going to ensure that these companies are investing in their leaders and their project managers to make sure that they're well rounded and they can handle all of these complexities that are going to be thrown at them. Because one thing I'm sure about, and I'm sure you'll agree, I know when we went to undergraduate, they weren't teaching us a lot of the skills you need for the parts of the projects outside of the technical pieces of it.
Anthony, I think that's very insightful. And one of the things that we've been focusing on within GIS and GISI is building stronger competencies with our project managers. And I think that is such a critical effort for every consulting engineering firm that's providing project management services or working on large complex projects. You've got to be able to develop your staff to keep pace with that complexity that you're referring to. And that takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Many, civil engineers, as you'd mentioned, early in their career, they aren't exposed to certain things that as they become a more senior project manager, as they work on larger projects, that they're going to get exposed to. And so it's very, I believe, strategically important for civil engineering firms, engineering consulting firms, to put a lot of effort and investment and to making sure that their project managers have those skill sets to keep pace with that change.
Yeah, and I love that you use the word competencies. That's such an important word when you think about learning and development, right? Really thinking through the competencies and the different skill sets that your professionals are going to need at every level of your organization to deal with these complex projects and clients, as you suggested, right? Your clients' organizations are becoming larger and more complex as well, especially if you're dealing with government contracts, federal contracts, right? That's kind of a whole nother skill set, if you will. So that's interesting to me. So let's dive in a little bit here to AI because as you said earlier, it's one of the hottest trends in the industry right now. So where are you seeing AI make the biggest impact on hiring, workforce planning, just I guess the industry in general from GISI's perspective?
Yeah, I get this question asked a lot. It is the hottest I think topic in our sector. First of all, it's very challenging to predict the future, right? It's a high risk game to crystal ball the future, but nonetheless, let me try. So, as we look at AI, I just know my own day to day routine. AI every day, every week is becoming a tool that I rely on more and more and more. Now, the thing that I'm finding for myself, and observing on our projects and with our staff, is at least for right now, and I think for the foreseeable future for the next few years, I see AI being there again just a tool, an important tool, but not some uh, people have forecasted or predicted essentially the complete demise of the engineering consulting industry. I don't see that happening. If it were to happen, it would be so far out into the future that it's going to be a long time before we get there. But I do see AI tools improving. I see that essentially the power of AI becoming more important. But there again, as we've been talking about earlier, just in our comments, the projects have a lot of different complexities. There's technical complexities on projects that we deliver in our industry. There's permitting complexities.
Hmm.
There's regulatory complexities. There's so many different complexities that I see again AI helping to make engineers more impactful and more valuable and therefore being more valuable to the clients. And so I see the engineer's value proposition increasing, not decreasing, if AI is properly used and is used again as a tool. So we have this saying, it's expert plus AI. And I think that's, at least for the foreseeable future, that's how AI is going to impact this industry.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that you can almost use it as another area of thought leadership and expertise, right? For you representing your client, right? Because a lot of our clients, let's be honest, they don't understand the AI, right? They may not know how to use it effectively. And they may be looking to us as the consultants to say, oh, wow, you can leverage AI to help us do this on our project. This is great. This makes our lives easier. This gives us more data, allows us to make better decisions. And so I think that that's another important thing. In fact, we run some PM Connect events where we bring project managers from different companies together in the industry a couple times a year. And we've been trying to do some AI workshops to really hear about what firms are literally actually doing with the AI. So, creating agents for certain things. And I really like your point about being an expert plus the AI, because I think that we forget that we're the trusted advisor for our clients, right? As consultants, as engineers. So they're looking to us for whatever value we can give them. And I think part of that value is not just doing the engineering work, but showing them how the AI and some of these technology tools can make their end product even better.
Exactly. I think that's exactly it. Now at GISI, we're in a little bit of a unique situation, right? Our situation around AI is that we have deep financial resources, right? We're a very substantive firm in
Sure.
terms of the scale of our business. We have many opportunities to invest in technology, which we are doing, but we are working to be very disciplined. I think this is one of those situations where you could overinvest uh,
Mm,
in AI technology, which is changing, by the way, on a weekly, monthly,
right.
quarterly basis. You know, the tools are developing, and we're really at the kind of early days here. And so, I think for us, the strategic focus has got to be figuring out where to make investments, how to apply AI tools, and to make sure that we don't get kind of ahead of ourselves and make investments that end up being poor investments.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I appreciate you, mentioning that, you have maybe some more money to work with than some of the smaller firms, leaders who might be listening to this episode as well, where they have to be, they make one wrong investment in AI, they could literally be upside down, right? Or they could lose a lot of money on that. So, and, you're the second executive in the last few weeks that I've had the chance to talk to about this. The other one being Kevin Haney, the CEO of Collier's Engineering and Design. And he was along the same lines as you, saying, this can be a black hole in a sense that you could throw a lot of money into, that still there's a lot of unknowns. And kind of he was mentioning how at CED, they try to go with, like, if there's like a Bentley, for example, that has programs and they're kind of messing around with the AI, right? We can kind of invest in their programs, let them kind of vet the AI and build off of something that's trusted and known, as opposed to something that maybe is not as well known. So I do definitely think there's some strategy around it. And I think your point is a good one. Just because you have maybe more money or some money set aside doesn't mean you need to burn it all on AI right away, because to your point, a new program comes out tomorrow, right? And then the program
Exactly.
that we bought is
Yeah,
obsolete.
that's right. And so what we've been investing a fair amount of resources is making sure that we are upskilling our staff to use existing AI tools that are available.
Yep.
We're also developing competencies around creating agents. So we're creating a variety of digital tools through these agents. We're also looking at GPT models as well. So we are putting resources and effort and leadership intention into improving our technology and our use of AI. But just like you said, it's got to be prudently done, because you
Yeah.
could easily get yourself kind of drunk with concern
Oh,
and
yeah.
misunderstanding and waste substantial resources.
Yeah, totally. And I really like what you just said there, in that you're investing in your people to be able to use the existing AI tools, right? There are so many tools already that exist, like in the Microsoft suite, right? Or just the Copilot, right? The tools that are right there on everyone's desktop, and they're not even using those to anywhere near their maximum productivity. So I think that's another good point, is before you start building up your tech stack with all these new programs and software, you have stuff, right? Are you utilizing that stuff as best as you can, to really be able to leverage it? And then and then you're also just kind of building your AI skill, your AI knowledge, that you can then roll it into other new tools and platforms as they become available. But there's no doubt that there's a lot there that we may not even be maximizing today, quite frankly.
That's right. And we are again ready when the time does come to make more investments and to move decisively and energetically. But right now, like I said, we're putting a lot of effort into understanding and upskilling, but doing it in a very thoughtful, prudent, but not. And that doesn't mean in a kind of lackluster or slow way.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Definitely prepared to. We are moving. We're prepared to move quickly as the technology develops.
Yeah, I think you said it, saying, prudently, right? That's the way to do it, right? Be really smart about what you're doing. So that's great. So let's talk a little bit about acquisitions. You've obviously had experience with this. You've been involved in acquisitions. What do you look for when you're evaluating whether an acquisition is the right strategic fit for GISI? And honestly, it's kind of like we just talked about investing in AI. There's a lot of stuff out there. How do you know what to invest in? There's a lot of companies out there, right? When you're thinking about acquisitions and where do we go. So tell us a little bit about your evaluation process. I'm interested in how you think about that.
Yeah, so we call them mergers, 'cause that word is better applies to how we view M&A.
Okay.
And so when we're looking for what we call a merger partner, we look at the things that many firms do around strategic fit. We look at the strength of the leadership. We look at the technical competency of the staff. Those are kind of normal things for most companies or many companies to look at. But in addition to those items, we also look at certain cultural things. So one of the structures or aspects of our business that's very important to us is our employee ownership. And so we're a little bit, they're again unusual because we're such a large firm, but we're an employee owned firm.
Huh.
We have more than 4,000 employee owners. And that employee ownership, the interest and the passion for it is something that we look for,
Hmm.
right? So our model is to find excellent firms who have great tailwinds because they're in the right sectors, the right markets, are offering the right services, they're in the right geographies, but also who have the leadership team who are passionate about the future and who are very excited about becoming a shareholder with us. And that shared culture of each one of us being an owner of the business shapes our culture, I think, in a different way from, say, a PE-owned firm or a publicly traded firm. And that employee ownership is an aspect that has, I think, driven our performance. Here we have superior organic growth to many in the industry. We also have superior success around M&A. Now, another aspect that makes us different than just about every other firm is that we see a lot of value in maintaining the brand and the culture of firms that join us. And I don't know of many other firms that do this as well. So when a merger partner, joins us, what we want to do, our preference, and we do this routinely, is we make great efforts to strengthen, in fact, the existing culture that they have. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't, quote unquote, integrate that business. But to us, the word integration means something very different than some of our fellow firms in this sector, right? So sometimes when you say what you don't do, that better explains what you do do. So let me
Yeah.
tell you a few things that we don't do, right? What we don't do is we don't obliterate, decades, it could be 100 years of a brand. We don't go in and come in with thousands of pages of policies and procedures and cram them down the throats of the new staff. We don't require everyone to kind of change their business card. But what we do is we partner with the firms that join us. We help them become better. We help fuel their growth. We help them focus investments on their staff and on their project managers. One of the things that we put a tremendous amount of effort in is our project managers. We've developed a series of programs. We have one program that we call the Distinguished Project Executive Program. And these programs are all around who we think the most important role in a consulting engineering firm is the project manager, right? Those are the individuals that are at the tip of that proverbial spear. They're out there leading the staff. They're delivering the work. They're interfacing with the client. And so we're looking for firms that embrace that concept as well, that embrace the concept of client service, technical excellence, and are very growth focused as well.
Yeah, that's great. And first of all, I love the end piece there about project management, of course. I mean, that's near and dear to our heart at EMI. We do a lot of PM development work, and it's great to hear when a company recognizes the value of the PMs. And I actually did do some reading up about your DPE program. I think I might have watched the video you posted about it on LinkedIn, which I think is great because I think one of the biggest pitfalls of consulting firms is that they do not share the knowledge of their project managers across the entire organization. And from what I gathered about your DPE program is it puts a big emphasis on bringing people from the different offices and different geographic locations together so that they are sharing that knowledge. Because I just think that that's the worst thing we can do is if we have someone sitting in Florida and someone sitting in California with the same problem, or, one person solved it and the other person doesn't know about it. And it seems like your program works really hard to create the pathways to share the knowledge.
That's right. And that program, I think, is a good example of our view around this term integration, right? So just exactly what you said. We are sharing knowledge across our nearly 11,000 staff in the consulting business. We're setting kind of common expectations around performance across every one of our operating companies. And that's what integration means to us, is really helping us all be better, helping us perform at a higher level, and to be more successful collectively than we would individually.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you listening, DPE stands for Distinguished Project Executive, which is a program that GIS has to bring their PMs together. And, I'm going through the whole thing, but you get the point. It's really about knowledge sharing, which is, like I said, we find to be one of the biggest pitfalls with all the organizations that we work with when it comes to project management and leadership development. So it's great to see that. And I really like what you said about, the shareholder piece of this, the entrepreneurial spirit of your employees. That obviously links back to your founders, like you said earlier, and them, I'm sure, wanting to make sure that that entrepreneurial spirit is shared down throughout the organization as it grows. And it sounds like with that ownership model, you really allow that to happen. So that's exciting, and that must be exciting for people that join GISI as well, which is great. All right, so let's talk about growth for a minute here. And I know before we talked about, it's dangerous to kind of look into your crystal ball and make predictions, but I'm going to ask you, just generally speaking, from what you're seeing in the indicators that you look at as an executive, what is your feel for our industry as a whole going forward in terms of growth? And then also for GISI, because I would imagine when you're this big, right, growing, requires something different than if you're a 50-person company trying to grow. So can you talk a little bit about like industry growth, your company's growth? What do you think that's going to look like going forward?
Yeah, that's a topic we think about every day. A good part of every day is how do we maintain our superior growth rates? Well, I guess the first thing I would say is, I think the fundamentals of our sector remain very strong, right? There's clearly, if we just look at infrastructure as one example, all kinds of infrastructure, right? Transportation infrastructure, water infrastructure, energy infrastructure, so forth. We're underinvested in the U.S. We're underinvested globally, so that there's a backlog of work. Now we have also a shortage of engineering talent.
Sure.
So I assume all of our competitors are the same situation that we're in that we are constantly on the hunt in the market for talent. We're constantly looking for the best and the brightest to join us. And just by definition, when you're looking for the best and brightest, there's not a lot of them out there. So those fundamentals of strong tailwinds, kind of low supply of talents in the industry, or a lower supply, I think is going to continue to drive opportunity and continue to drive a robust market. Now, of course, as we talked about, AI is a factor here. But there again, my view, just to reinforce it, is as it relates to AI, as it relates to growth, is I think ultimately it's going to drive, for some firms, more growth. Now, there clearly will be some losers. There'll be some firms in certain parts of the market who offer certain services who are going to be significantly disrupted. I think that's clearly going to happen. But I think as an industry, as a sector, the overall sector is going to benefit. And we're going to continue to become more impactful and more important to our clients, because we will be more powerful in terms of our technical prowess and our ability to shape not only design or construction costs, but also operating costs through better technical capabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to your point, I mean, the infrastructure is not going to get better over time, right? Especially the existing infrastructure. We know that. But to your point, there's less people that maybe can do the design if we're not putting out the same number of engineers, which is going to cause a bit of a challenge. But I think the tools and the AI and some of the things that you and I have already talked about today could certainly help to close that gap a little bit. Not that it's going to replace us, people, like we said, but it's going to help us to maybe do our jobs more effectively, maybe more efficiently in certain ways. So I think it'll be interesting to see how all of that unfolds. But I think regardless, the industry, like you said, the sector looks very strong with growth in terms of the projects, these mega projects, the complex projects that we're going to continue to need. I mean, water systems are in trouble, or water quality, bridges, roadways. So it does seem that
Energy
it's going to be strong.
infrastructure.
Energy infrastructure, a huge one, of course, absolutely. So there's lots to be, and there's even, I tell people this all the time, there are jobs in our industry that don't exist today, right? That are going to exist soon with all the technology. Like I interviewed someone recently who was telling me about how now when you do roadway construction, a lot of these roadways, they're embedding sensors in the roadway. They're going to talk to your cars, right? I mean, like these are things that didn't exist that
That's right.
now we're going to have more people in our company that are focused on the sensors and the technology and other things. So it's going to create jobs as well. And that's something that I think we need to keep in mind. All right, Derek, last question I have for you. For those firm leaders that are listening today and they're thinking about investing in their leadership team to support the growth of their organizations, what do you think they should be focusing on in terms of investing in their leadership to ensure that those investments translate into real business results? I mean, we do a lot of learning and development training at EMI, PM development, leadership development, and it really, you have to do it the right way to make sure that, you're investing in people and it's returning for them and for the organization. What thoughts can you share about that from what you've done at GISI?
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said earlier in our discussion here, and that is projects are becoming more complex, right? And that also means that the industry, each company is facing a more complex environment. So my recommendation, and this is what we're doing, is that for firms that want to be successful in this consulting engineering sector, they really need to upskill their leadership teams. And you need to have very good succession planning. And it takes a fair amount of effort, time to develop truly effective and entrepreneurial leaders. But the world, I think in almost every aspect, particularly in our engineering consulting arena, will just continue to get more complex. And if you don't have leaders who can keep pace with that complexity, your organization is going to suffer performance. And so that's something that, from our perspective, we are very focused on. And in fact, we're spending, I would say, a part of every week on that very topic of how do we develop the next line of leaders and how do we help improve our existing leaders.
Well, that's interesting. And I agree 100%. I mean, if you want to grow, you said it before as well, in terms of the project manager role and how important that is at GISI and how much you invest in that. And the same with just leadership beyond project management. They are growing your organization, especially when you have also you have the employee owner angle, which is also great. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff that you have going there in terms of supporting your growth. So once again, Derek Amidon. Derek is a licensed professional engineer, chief operating officer at GISI, and chief executive officer at GISI Consulting Group. Derek, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us here today on the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm delighted to be here.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Derek. He's a great leader, and GISI is doing amazing things. So we're thrilled to have him. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you did, please subscribe to our channel here. We do put out videos like this on a regular basis to help engineers and technical professionals become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.